Hello, thanks everyone. It's a bit of a dramatic entrance, isn't it? Get started now. So welcome everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by 4 incredible women who are leaders in this particular area. I'm just going to give everyone a quick minute to introduce themselves. So Marva, if I can kick off with you.
Yeah, so my name is Marva. I am a presenter in football particularly. I do sort of sports journalism as well. And I guess I can now call myself a documentarian, although my first documentary came out last week, so that's very recent for me. And yeah, I've just done a documentary about South Asian girls in football and the kind of lack of representation, and particularly on diversity in women's football. And then I also just do things like go up and down the country interviewing Premier League players and like playing FIFA with them, which isn't a real job, but I'm somehow here.
Hi, my name is Ursula. I am from Spain, and I run a company called International Sports Broadcasting. And yeah, as the name says, we do sports broadcasting. Recently, we've also added ISB Films, which not only does documentaries around sport, but we also have a few feature film projects in the making. One actually about sport as well. So I studied filmmaking, so I've always wanted to sort of add that on. And content right now is the thing to do. So yeah, it's very exciting, and we are just getting ready for the World Games this summer in China, and yeah, lots of other stuff.
Hi everyone, it's Fabiola Wilcox. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications for Footballco. We are the world's leading media sports business in the world. You possibly know us better from the consumer brands or the various consumer brands that we own. Go Indivisa, Community First, Women's Football, Mundial, Front Tree, and so on. So really looking forward to our chat today.
Hi, my name's Chloe. I currently head up She's a Baller, which is a creative media agency and a social media platform specialised in women's sports. Background-wise, I used to play in the WSL for Arsenal and Crystal Palace and Spurs. And then I was a litigation lawyer in a previous life, which is a whole other whirlwind anyway. And then I was a women's football editor at The Athletic for a year and a half before joining SAB just over a year ago. So yeah, lovely to meet you all.
Brilliant. So first up, it would be great to start looking at sort of the bigger picture in this area, particularly around content and culture. What's changing? What could be doing better? So Fabi, to come to you first. As Gen Z shifts away from more of a traditional media approach, what do you think fan-first storytelling looks like in 2025?
Yeah, it's an interesting shift. I think one of the changes that we are seeing is very much this shift towards platform native, short form, fan-centric content, which is nothing new, right? It's something that we have been seeing for quite a few years now. But it most definitely, it changes the approach to how we create content. So if we just think about how Gen Z interacts with football or any other sports, to be fair, you know, it's hard to see how they're going to be sitting around on a Saturday afternoon, listening and watching to, you know, post-match day analysis and tactical analysis and that sort of thing. But what they are doing is they are interacting on social media. That's how they are discovering the sport. That's how they are discovering players through, you know, short form, snackable, social first content, which really gives them that instant burst of interaction and connection. So with that then comes the need for us as media producers and content creators to be able to adapt. One size doesn't fit all, and I think what used to work for traditional media no longer applies. So it very much, we need to lean into this kind of new world and creating content that really feels fit for purpose for this new generation of fans.
And you talk there about adaptation as well. What do you think the role of entertainment is in sports media, and particularly sort of tensions around showing up as yourself, being authentic, but also credibility and this sort of still impression that women's sports and women's football perhaps in particular, that is perhaps having fun in your content is perhaps unprofessional?
Yeah. We kind of talk a lot about that, and it is interesting, having coming from a club environment and now have been working for Footballco, I see how different it is, because there is definitely I'll call it a stigma or a taboo around having fun in women's content, because there is this idea that if we have too much fun, if we're too entertaining, then maybe we're not going to be taken seriously, or the game's not going to be seen as professional, or whatever else. But actually, we're missing a point, because that could well be the unique selling point that actually separates us from the women's game, from the men's game altogether. That could well be the thing that we need to lean into in order to create a product that feels incredibly relevant for fans and for this new generation that is becoming followers and building our fandom. And I think it's really different, actually, because in the US, they have a slightly, much more open approach to entertainment and having fun around football. We have recently actually acquired a brand in the US called Soccer Girls Problems. They are kind of a social-first podcast and brand. And actually, the entire purpose of that brand sits around poking fun at the challenges that comes with playing football, watching football, being part of the football community. So they have found, and they're incredibly popular, they're really refreshing, and the content does really, really well, because they found that niche. They understood that actually being able to, not take yourselves too seriously creates connection, because those players are just like us, right? So it brings us together rather than kind of keeps us apart. And here in the UK, in Europe, to be fair, in other side, we are always, like I said, with this narrative around protecting players and making sure that we're playing on the safe side, and worried about, the reputation of the club or the organization and so on. And by default, you ended up creating content that isn't as engaging, and it just feels too polished and slightly unauthentic.
I think I'd definitely just sort of jump on the back of what you were saying there, couldn't agree more. And I think just to provide sort of wider context there, I think having sort of grown up in playing spaces, I think, I'm 35. When I first started playing football, the worst thing I wanted was someone to make fun of me or to poke fun at the game. So I think it initially comes from that fear, I suppose, that you don't want to poke fun of women's sports. But I think we've reached a stage now where women's sports has proven itself so much. The athleticism, the dynamism, the personality, the tenacity, the aggression of the players, that actually we're come full circle in a way that we can actually go back to sort of taking the mick out of some of the problems that do exist, but in a safer space of doing that. And I think I've got to agree in terms of sort of the more native and original content. I mean, when we work with brands, one of the big messages we always say is trying to create something that feels very organic and natural for the players to get the best out of their personalities. The worst thing you want is for a player to have to sit there and recite a line about how they feel about a certain product and how amazing it is, when it just does not feel natural in the slightest. And I think one of the biggest examples maybe of players being able to showcase their personalities has been the World Sevens tournament that took place in May, and obviously a first of its kind, short, sharp, punchy content. All the players had these amazing sort of celebrations as they were coming onto the pitch. They were cartwheeling, they were fancy dressed, there was all of this, and there wasn't ever a sense of, these players aren't taking the competition seriously. It was more of a case of, once it comes to game day, game face on. But in the meantime, absolutely, let's showcase what these players are about, whether that's the fun side, the sarcastic side, the jovial side, whatever it is. So, and that content absolutely smashed it for that month there, that week. So yeah, it's just a case in point.
It's almost as if we are in a place now where we can finally have fun with the game, right?
100%, so we should.
Yeah, and there's some great personalities, like Maia, I think, is certainly leading the way in that as well, showing you can show up as yourself, and you don't have to you can be professional and fun at the same time. Marva, you obviously work across men's and women's football. What are you seeing as the sort of biggest differences between when you're presenting or working in those spaces?
I think it's how the content is received. I think while we've been able to see kind of more innovation in men's football, because it's just been there longer in terms of the appetite for content, but I think there's still this pushback when it comes to men's football, because there's, let's say, a tradition that comes with that's lasted a long time, and you get these fans who refuse to have anything that goes away from tradition because it's like an insult to their culture and their fan. Whereas I think with women's football, we've got this privilege of it's new, it's exciting, we can kind of make the history what we want it to be. And so I think when I work with good brands and good platforms, they really lean into that and kind of take advantage of that in a way that sometimes men's football can't. And I think audience-wise, women's football audiences are much more receptive to that, and they love it, and there's a big appetite for it, because I think for so long there was this kind of perception that, well, actually I think there wasn't the care to put in any, like there wasn't the thought of what kind of content can we do for women's football. It was just like, oh, this is a sort of tick box, we just need to say something about it, we'll put some one little line on the website and that'll be it. And I think that really hindered how women's football audiences like approached it and how they connected with women's football, because football and all sport is about narrative. Like if you don't have something to cling on to, people say, oh, it's about the quality. It's not just about the quality. It's about like, you want to know, did that player used to play for that team? So now they're trying to get their revenge. And it's like, it's plot lines. It's things that you want to latch onto, and you care about these people. And for so long in women's football, we didn't have that. We're starting to get that now, and I think when you see it, the women's football audience are way more receptive to it. You can do whatever you want, kind of, obviously within context and within constraints, but women's football audiences enjoy it, whereas some of the pushback we've got in men's football audiences when I do, anything, it's just like, this isn't what football is, and it's like, okay, I'm sorry. So I think we should lean into that more. We don't have this long, 100-year tradition because of many reasons. However, let's lean into that, and we create our own traditions now.
Chloe, you work closely as part of She's a Baller with lots of different brands, global brands. And you made some interesting points before earlier as well about how brands can show up authentically in this space. What are you seeing that's working well? And you can give examples of brands if you like. And what advice would you give to brands or clubs or organisations that want to do better in this area?
I think a lot of the brands that we work for already have ambassadors that they sort of have been utilised, who might be, ambassadors that they've had for 1 or 2, 3 years. And I think we always say to brands, well, what is it that your ambassadors are really passionate about? Sometimes, and you have to be really honest, ambassadors are just part of a brand because the contract was good enough, 100%. And absolutely, that's part and parcel of the brand space. But a lot of the female athletes that we're seeing are actually getting involved with brands that really resonate with who they are. So whether that's they're really keen for environmental impact, or whether they absolutely love women's health, or actually they just really love this brand of food or whatever it is, and they use supplements. But we always say to brands, really get to know your athletes and how best they like to react on set, and what really floats their boat, and how their personality is, what we were saying before. So I think trying to understand that and then producing content off the back of what the athlete actually can deliver, I think is absolutely key. I think, as Fabiola was saying, in terms of the types of delivery of the content as well. So I think when you're looking at the target audience of who you're trying to really appeal to, longer form content might appeal to an older audience, whereas the short form, snappier content might appeal to your, 12, 13, 14-year-olds who have a slightly shorter attention span, I'd say, that we've seen in terms of our data. So I think there's different ways that you can kind of format that content, and don't just think that a one-size-fits-all is going to be the best approach for every type of content that we see out there. I think it also expanding your reach as well. Obviously, football is 100% one of the biggest sports on the planet, and I think obviously women's football kind of feels like it's a few steps ahead in terms of attention and publicity and sort of the revenue that's being generated. But what we're seeing, especially this summer, where we've got the Women's Rugby World Cup, you've got the F1 Academy, you've got female golfers stepping into the space and into the spotlight so much more, is that actually there is cross-pollination of audiences too. So don't rule out that, just because you have those football fans there, a lot of our audience are so engaged in the Women's Rugby World Cup this year. So I think you're missing out a big section of women's sport fans generally, because generally speaking, women in this room, you might not be or fans of every single sport, but I will 100% go to a sport I'm not even that much of a fan of, because I just want to be there to support women and see the games grow across the board. So, I'd definitely say cross-pollination of sports, getting to know your athletes properly, and, doing the legwork in terms of what happens with the variety of content and different platforms that you can use.
Be interesting if there's anyone else's sort of guidance, anything else to add on that one?
No, I think I completely agree. We're working on a summer event, which is in a couple of weeks, a watch party for the Euros, and we were talking about precisely that. So we're like, do we show the Wimbledon on screens? Do we not? And we landed on exactly that. Like usually, women that enjoy sport, they will football, they will enjoy other sports as well, and it's about showcasing that support and making sure that we are kind of joined up as we rise up.
Well,
sorry, I just wanted to add, I think it's also important to note that I was talking to a friend the other day, with men's football, usually there's violence. And I still have not heard any women's event that has any violent breakouts or people beating each other up about, winning or not winning, which I think should also be pointed out. I think that's pretty cool,
It's much more of a family environment, isn't it, is what we see from data and all that.
Just a quick reminder that if you want any questions, do put them on the app as well, and we'll take those at the end if we've got time. So really keen to touch a bit more on innovation and impact in broadcasting in particular. Ursula, international sports broadcasting are doing some really interesting work in this area. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
There's so many things to do and there's constant innovation, but our big event now coming up, which is the World Games, is a very interesting one because it is a massive event. It's actually the second largest multi-sporting event in the world after the Olympics, but nobody knows about it. But it's actually really cool because it gives us an opportunity to show off sports that are very, very niche and most people don't really know much about them. And because the event is, they're very much into sustainability and using smaller venues so that it looks more visited. And we can actually have a lot more access to the athletes. It's a very family environment event. So it gives us an opportunity not only to try and come up with innovation to show off the sport better, but it also gives us an opportunity to test out new things. So we don't have 50 cameras that we're throwing at the event, but per sport, like in World Cup or Olympics, but we choose really cool camera angles to tell the story differently, to get the spectators closer to the sport. And we're also capable of using new innovation that maybe in other events are not able to be used because, like you were saying, no, you have to cover it this way, no, you have to use that, no. So we have this year we're going to use a thing called InnoMotion, which is virtual graphics, AI of course, but it's really cool. It shows the trajectory of the archery of the actual arrows. They used it in Paris last year for the Olympics. We're going to have a new AI strobe motion system in parkour, in trampolining, and also in water ski and wakeboard, which shows mainly for individual sports, but it shows the actual exact movement, and it can show you the speed, the height, and the distance. Then I'm very happy, but we just found out that we're going to make a deal with ARRI. For those of you who don't know, ARRI are usually classically known for film cameras, but they have a new type of system now that can be incorporated into any broadcast scenario. So we're going to use ARRI cameras to produce the water ski and the wakeboard together with the strobe motion. So it's going to be a really cool cinematic look. And generally it's quite normal to have cinematic cameras now in football and tennis and other events like that, but they're usually used for fans, to show that sort of depth of field shots where you can see the players coming in and you have the background out of focus. But for this, we're actually going to use all the cameras are going to be ARRI cameras, so it'll be quite new. So I'm very excited.
Sounds very exciting.
Yes, especially for a filmmaker. But and then we are creating a platform, which again another platform, but it's going to be a fully live streamed platform where all the sports are going to be live. It's going to be open to the entire planet, including China, which is also quite cool. And there are so many sports in the World Games which are so unusual, but they have a huge following. So it's quite difficult to sell the rights because it's also fragmented anyway. But with the platform, we decided just to go for it and to open it up for everyone. So we'll have live streaming highlights. We're going to have a daily show, which is also quite unusual, with a studio show with a few hosts going around the city, talking about the sports and conducting interviews. But we'll also have athletes and celebrities coming into the show. And all of that is going to be available on the platform. The platform will also have athlete profiles on there so people can connect and engage with the athletes. So yeah, it's all quite exciting. And 40 something days to go, so.
Wow. Yeah, good luck. I know you're really passionate about female representation, and I think we're all aware, we touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of representation in the boardroom in sports, as MD of broadcasting. What work are you doing at the moment to help encourage more women into the boardroom and at those more senior positions?
Well, we're not really doing anything specifically apart from giving opportunities, which is, I was very lucky to be given an opportunity from very young age. My father ran the company before me, or he created it, but he was one of the few, I guess, men in that time that was like, I don't care what your color or your whatever orientation, whatever you do at home is not my problem. I want to get the best people. So he just, gave me a job he asked me, do you want to work in an event? And I said, yeah, and here we are, So I personally never had any sort of problems in that area, but broadcasting has always been, I've always found myself in an OB van looking around and saying, wow, I'm the only one, So it is quite unusual, but now also with the opportunities with universities, with, girls getting the idea, hey, I want to be behind a camera, or I'm not afraid to pull a cable, which has always been sort of also kind of a man's job, which, it is, but why not? So we now have 25 employees, and I just did the count the other day. Out of the 25, we have 13 women working. So it's just by coincidence, but we've decided to, or also by coincidence, we have a full production team in Chengdu that is all girls from all over the world, and I'm trying really hard to engage with universities from the beginning, so media and communication schools, broadcast schools, which are now also more available. Before, when I was going to school, there was no broadcast school really. And that's also something that my dad really instilled, not only in ISB, but also at OBS, which he also created, Olympic Broadcasting Services. But we always do a broadcast training program, which involves universities of the city where the Olympics were held. And he started that, I think, in 1992 in Barcelona. So obviously, it gives people a chance to work as a camera assistant, an audio assistant, loggers, production assistants in all different areas of the operation. And we're doing the same this year in Chengdu with Cardiff University, with the Real Madrid Media School, which is related to the European University in Madrid, and also with the Sichuan University. So, I think that's the only way, just because we can also kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. I think you were mentioning that earlier, that, if you just put women into any position just like that, and they don't do a good job, then it could backfire, So we also need to make sure that it's the right position for the right job, and you give enough training and also, opportunity. So.
That's incredibly important, isn't it? It does start in early education. I think similar to broadcasting, the business of football, let's call it, we need to become a lot more visible for actually young girls in early education, so that they can see jobs that are available in football off the pitch, to be able to choose those jobs later on. At Footballco, actually, this year, for International Women's Day, we did a campaign called More Women in Football to do precisely that. We're currently working with Bloomsbury Football and our friends at Unilever to deliver these career workshops for girls under 16s, because we think that's kind of the time that we can inspire them into pursuing a career in football, even if they ended up not playing on the pitch. And I guess once we get them into the sport, then the job becomes, how do we coach them? How do we nurture them and into becoming the next generation of female leaders in sport? And then obviously later on in life is, how do we bring moms back into the business of football after having had children, and with flexible working, part-time opportunities, job sharing, all that good stuff that we should be doing anyway to be able to keep women in football later on.
Yeah, I think that's so important, that point around being intentional about it as well. And I know one of our clients is Rugby World Cup, Women's Rugby World Cup, and Sarah Massey in particular has been really hot on that. And they have an all-female leadership team, which is actually still in 2025 pretty unusual in sport for a major competition like that. So I think that intent to do something about it is so important. And what do you think is how that can sort of affect content creation as well? I know we kind of spoke when we caught up before around a lack of female photographers and stylists and things like that. Like, how do you think that the female representation helps in terms of the end product?
Yeah, I think, when I first joined SAB, a big part of my job was just putting together the strategy and how we wanted to approach the content. And I think it's not just the content itself, but it's also the approach to, choosing the right people for the jobs. And I think in the freelance space, we do rely a lot on freelance producers, videographers, photographers, stylists, creatives. And what we've seen recently, obviously, there has been a massive expansion in people wanting to get into those industries. And I think sometimes, some of the projects that we work on are quite high budget, and obviously you need people with a lot of experience. But there's always space, I think, to try and encourage people with, who don't have any experience, because it's so hard to get that one first job on your CV. So, having these people kind of shadow the more experienced people on your production shoots, that's something we've looked at doing a lot more this year, because we want them to grow so that we have a bigger roster of people to work with. And I think the more variety of voices that you use and the more variety of vision that you see on the shoots, like they're capturing angles that we didn't see, or they're capturing something that, or approaching the player's delivery in a way that we wouldn't have done. So, and I think it makes for better content, because where, I might be a mixed race gay woman in sport, but I don't have the vision of a South Asian person's perception. I don't have the vision of an older person coming into sport. So I think for us, it's definitely about having those variety of voices. And I think we talk a lot about next gen and Gen Z and sort of inspiring the next generation to get into these careers. But anecdotally, I've seen so many more mature people get into the space, women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, now thinking that sport is an avenue for them because it wasn't open to them and the career opportunities didn't exist before. So we absolutely, want to cherish those voices as well, because they're just as important. They have experiences that we haven't been through. So, there's a sort of great work to do, I think, in terms of the top and the bottom. But, we love sort of working with more people across the space. It's everything that sport is.
And Marva, from your point of view, obviously working in presenting, how important do you think it is to sort of keep women at the forefront?
Yeah, massively important. I think it's difficult because we know what the internet is like and we know what comments are like, and I think it's just a case of how much support can we give everyone that is involved, and that's where women behind the scenes really helps as well, because then they kind of understand that to a level that other people necessarily won't. And I think sometimes with this stuff, it just happens over time. If you look at some of those firsts, people like Claire Balding, Gabby Logan, Alex Scott, some of these female presenters, for me, I look up to so much because I know that they've almost had to take these bullets, for the next generation. And that's kind of something I tell myself of when I'm getting these hate comments and people just can't believe a woman is talking about football still. I just think every comment that I get, I'm hopefully making it better for the next generation, and that next person that comes through doesn't have to take those, because it has just become normalised. I remember when Gabby Logan first did guest appearances on Match of the Day, and I remember this was back in 2011 or something, and my Twitter feed at that point was just couldn't believe it, literally couldn't wrap their heads around it. And now, yes, they still get hate, but there's a kind of level of just sort of acceptance. But I think that also comes from these platforms and brands, like we were saying. people want diversity. The brands themselves, they know that they have to at this stage because that's what represents the football audience. Like, football fans aren't just older, white, middle-aged men now. Like, that's not what football fans are. So these platforms and brands know they have to kind of show diversity, but do they want the issues that come with that? They want the benefits of that, of looking like they're a progressive company because they've got diversity of what people look like, but do they want the diversity of opinions? Do they want the diversity of thought that comes with that? And I think with that, that's a lot on the brands and platforms that are doing that to make sure they support those people, especially with presenters, because we are the face of it and we're the ones who are going to get the hate if there's a problem with production or a question, etc. But I think sometimes yes, it's support on those things, but sometimes it's just support in terms of backing your talent. Like, I know that when I get comments on Premier League stuff or whatever, I don't mind because I know that the directors, I know the producers back me as a person, they support me, so I don't care what a 12-year-old has to say online because I know that the important people are there supporting me and giving me the opportunities.
Yeah. And what, more broadly, I guess, what do you think, maybe this one for you, Fabi, what's holding us back? What's holding women's sport back creatively? Is it boardrooms? Is it representation? Is it a lack of creativity? What's your view on that? I'd be interested in other people's as well.
I'm laughing because I know I have strong opinions about this. I'm going to call it gatekeeping, for a lack of a better way to explain it. But I think, back to what you're saying, the people sitting at the tables where the decisions are being made, they don't understand women's football culture as it stands today, and this new wave of how content needs to be produced, people interacting with everything, and they're still judging ideas with the same old school thinking that they have been doing for the past 20 years, right? So I think that is the challenge. What I see a lot of is, social teams on clubs, players themselves really wanting to try new formats, do different things, and kind of evolve and move the content forward creatively, but actually being blocked by kind of the next level upwards in terms of, I was talking to a colleague here around reputation, external reputation and damage and et cetera, and that is the fear that is stopping those senior leaders in sport from saying yes to new ideas rather than no. How do we change that? We just need more diversity, because I think with that comes different experiences, different perspectives, and that will enhance the business of football like it did for everything else.
And I guess we've talked a lot about content in this particular panel, but what's your view on whether there's still a role out there for more traditional broadcasting?
I would say there's still a massive role. I think when I talk about the importance of like the informal side and the content side, I view that as an addition to everything else we've got going on. I think we still need serious journalists. I think we still need, in-depth reporting and longer storytelling. What I think is we need almost sometimes the separation. Don't send a journalist to talk about a serious topic and then ask them to name their 5 favourite songs they want to listen to before a game. It's like, it kind of ruins both aspects, and I don't think every presenter can do both. And so it's kind of, making sure we have that separation, we have the important storytelling, but we have the fun as well. And I think you can have both. I think they can live there together. But it's again, diversity. It's like the more diverse types of content we see, I think just makes the sport a more well-rounded place that we can all enjoy.
Yeah, but I guess you all saw last year, I don't know if that was seen here in the UK, but NBC brought the likes of Snoop Dogg and so on onto the Olympics, which some might say, what was that for? But, a lot of people liked it. Not sure if Snoop Dogg was the right choice, but anyway, he had a lot of fun. But what we're doing, for example, for all these sports in the World Games, who again are sports that a lot of people wouldn't even know to describe what they are, but we are using a traditional commentator that is used to commentating on like a proper commentator, and then we're using commentators that come directly from the federation so that they can actually give a real commentary on the move or the technique or what have you. So we mix it up a little bit. So our commentators are sort of overall, they've done anything to everywhere, and they can really talk about, more from a TV perspective. And then we have the technical guys that come from the federation that'll explain to the viewer what the move is in the dance or in the tug of war, why did the guy from the tug of war win better than the other team, So, but we have to keep to the traditional broadcast commentating, because we have to keep in mind that it is an international audience. So it's also very different if you're commentating for, let's say, the UK audience, and in our case, we have to think about every single country that's taking the feed. So you have to be very neutral and unbiased, obviously. But
I agree. There is a big role for traditional broadcasters to do. If you think about particularly large-scale events like the Euros, the World Cup, in many, many ways, that is the entry point for a lot of new fans into the sport. I remember it was last year, the Olympics. I've got a 7-year-old, Yolanda. We were watching the gymnastics together, and she just got inspired and obsessed to this day. I had to put her on gymnastics, and just purely by watching, a couple of days of gymnastics on the Olympics, it's incredibly inspiring. So I think there is definitely a job for traditional broadcasters. I love to see, the likes of the BBC, Sky, and ITV and so on supporting women's football. That's incredibly powerful. I think where there is something for us to kind of lean into and explore a little bit better is, for example, when I see the likes of Netflix doing a deal with FIFA for the Women's World Cup in the next couple of Women's World Cup. And it did make me wonder if, putting that entry point into fandom behind a paywall, if that is going to help us build a game or not. I don't have the answer to that. I guess time will tell. But it's an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm conscious of time, and I did promise that we'd try and get to at least one question. So, first up here, how can athletes best exploit the media spotlight whilst accepting with increased success will come with newsworthiness and more journalist inquiry into their private lives?
It's a that's a great question. It's a really super difficult one to navigate, I think, as an athlete. I think, generally speaking, athletes at the elite level will have a team of agents supporting them to kind of help them with PR and comms around some of the more difficult aspects. But I think 100% it depends on how much the athlete wants to give up about their private life. I think you have to accept, the more you're in mainstream media, the more you're doing sort of in the mainstream space, there is going to be that increased attention around, who you're dating or where you went on Saturday night, or, if you got drunk on that one time. You look at the sort of the attention around Katie McCabe. She had a couple of drinks after the Lisbon Champions League final, and so she won it. But all the attention around, how crazy she was on the rooftop bus and things like that, I think, there are, but at the same time, those are the personalities that the fans love to see the most. Katie McCabe, Leah Williamson, Millie Bright doing TikTok dances, some of the youngsters like Jess Park on, increasing their profiles on platforms like that. That's what you want to encourage more of to a certain extent, because that does lead to the athletes then having greater exposure to brand partnership deals and being able to create and generate that revenue for themselves. But there is that fear, I think, that if you're going to take that step into mainstream space, there is always going to be a risk that you take a step out of line, or something is criticised, or you get the wrong types of fans trying to sort of produce negative comments about you. So it is very tough, but I think you have to be very self-assured that the more you put out there, and that's for anyone, the more you put out there, the more at risk you are, I suppose, of things coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting balance, isn't it, to get right? But we've got 45 seconds left, so I'm going to go for one more. Do you think there would be interest in showing to a public audience that of the sports science and innovation behind women's sports? I want to give this shout out as well. We at LJMU would love to showcase our research and practice in women's sport.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that we do as She's a Baller now, because of the size of our audience, is around data and insights. So instead of, the conversations around women's sport has drastically moved on. It's not how many more bums we're getting on seat and how many more eyes we're getting on TVs. It's, around some of the more nuanced topics, the ACLs, menstruation. It's around the LGBTQ plus audience in the space. It's around, more mature people getting involved in football. It's around, can the world cope with a World Sevens tournament and a format in between the Euros? There's so many more different conversations taking place, and data and insights definitely plays a massive part of that. I mean, when we go out to our audience every week with data and insights questions on, just getting a real finger on the pulse about what they're thinking about the WSL manager merry-go-round, those are some of the most hotly contested topics. I mean, we did something around player and club loyalty when Miedemar went over to City, and one of the biggest response that we got back was 57% of the audience was saying, well, I'd move clubs because Miedemar's moved clubs, and that really shook us that where fan loyalty is completely different. So data and insights is something that the audience 100% wants to see more of, and I think the more data we have, the more we have a better understanding of the space. So yes to whoever posed that question, get in touch.
There you go.
Definitely.
Yeah, straight answer there. Brilliant. Well, we are now going over time, so just want to say thank you so much to this amazing panel. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.